Hi,
Hi,
I'm Sara Ines Calderon,
I'm Adriana Maestas.
and this is your Latino Politics Roundup Immigration Edition. And we wanted to go over the top stories pertaining to immigration this week, as that's a big issue today or this year in the Congress and with President Obama. And so we wanted to just kind of update you on kind of the latest stories and the latest news about that. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, share it, leave us comments, follow us on Twitter. I'm Sara Chica D.
I'm Latino Politics.
And so just kind of diving right in, the thing that I thought was really interesting this week was the numbers.
Yeah, the deferred action numbers came
Deferred
out.
action numbers came out.
So
really
basically,
cool.
over 150,000 young people who have been granted or have been approved for deferred action.
150,000.
And the total number of applications received is a little bit over 400,000. So it seems like there's a little bit of backlog, but they're moving through them. Another interesting thing is they broke down the countries of origin, and the top country is Mexico. Comes as no surprise. But just to give you sort of the top 5, it was Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Peru.
Interesting.
And then after that is South Korea. So, like we always say, that immigration is not necessarily a Latino issue. Of course, obviously immigration from Asia, something that's very compelling to a lot of Asian Americans. They also broke down the states of residence. I'm just going to give you the top 3: California, Texas, and New York. So for the deferred action applicants. Another thing that came out in the news this week about immigration in general that relates to deferred action is the hiring of 2 deferred action recipients by congressional offices. One of them, Erika Andiola, was hired by Congresswoman Kirsten Sinema. She's a new congresswoman from Arizona. She's a Democrat, supposed to be quite progressive. And this comes just like right after Erika was in an unfortunate situation where ICE had come and raided her home and took a sibling and her mother. Mm-hmm. So they have been released, but Erika now has a job with a member of Congress. Yeah. She'll be working in their district office in Arizona. Congressman Luis Gutierrez of Illinois also hired a deferred action recipient this week as well. Jose M. Quintero was hired as an employee in his district office. And the other thing is Jose Quintero was also one of the first deferred action recipients.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting how this deferred action is playing out, because if you said that's just like they've received just over 400,000 applications, I believe that they estimated there were 800,000 people eligible. Mm-hmm. So
I've heard that and maybe up to 1 million. Right?
Interesting. So we'll see how the progress on that front goes. So immigration reform in general, though, I was speaking to an immigration policy expert from the University of Texas this week, Terry Givens. I'm going to put the entire interview in the description box. Don't forget to look at that. I also have her video interview, which I'll also put that link.
It's a great interview.
It's a really great interview. Professor Givens is very knowledgeable on immigration policy. And she made some really interesting points. One, she says that reasonably speaking, given the lack of control that Speaker Boehner has had over House Republicans, especially when it comes to compromise, is going to push immigration reform to 2014 if anything passes the House. She says it's probably going to be reasonable for President Obama to work with the Senate, talking to people like Charles Schumer, maybe John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, maybe, probably Harry Reid, working on some sort of comprehensive immigration reform plan in the Senate, but then it's going to get blocked once it goes to the House for the aforementioned reasons. She also made a really interesting point that immigration is probably going to be used as a wedge issue in the 2014 congressional elections. And so here we are trying to address this really important national issue, but apparently people are already trying to think about how can they kind of use it in negative campaign ads next year. Well, probably towards the end of this year.
Yeah.
Well,
it's more of like a football. That's what everybody always says. They like to toss it around, so
exactly.
Might as well keep it going into the next election.
And then I think the other interesting thing that she points out is that it's really important to President Obama to get this immigration reform through, not just because he promised Latino voters, and obviously 1 out of 10 voters last election was Latino, but also because if Democrats can make this happen, then it might follow a similar pattern that happened after civil rights legislation with black voters in the Democratic Party, which is cementing that bloc as a secure democratic voting machine, which it pretty much
like
is
a realignment.
it's like 60, numbers I've said is 60 to 70% Latinos vote for the Democrats anyways. This would just kind of make it like a historical cement them, historically or going forward. So that was really interesting. But I think one thing that came out in Mass Wired this week, a story by Dustin Mendis that I thought was really interesting, is talking about how, yes, you have all of these technology folks in the Silicon Valley talking about immigration reform and that they really need, immigration reform, but that sometimes the character of that conversation can be kind of racist because they're really not talking about people who are going to be cleaning their offices in Silicon Valley necessarily, but they're talking about educated and skilled workers with PhDs from India or Pakistan or whatever other kind of skilled labor they're looking for. And I mean, it can get pretty blatant if you ask me. I mean, recently one gentleman was speaking at the Consumer Electronics Show, and he kind of changed his tone, but previously this gentleman, Gary Shapiro, had said, "It seems incomprehensible to me that we would prefer random people who may be illiterate, do not speak the language, have health problems, and are a burden on society over healthy, educated PhDs." So we're talking about, obviously, racist concerns, but we're also talking about classism and other
and very
things like
kind
that.
of, that's a little overt in that quote.
It's pretty overt.
But it's also kind of, in a way, the thinly veiled racism. I mean, it doesn't come out and say it, but he talks around it.
Exactly. So I think one thing that concerns me as we move forward, talking about immigration reform, is that kind of thinly veiled or even kind of overt preference for who deserves immigration reform and who does not. So one final point that Terry Givens said, given especially this, is that because the Republicans are probably going to be barriers to a comprehensive plan, what's going to be more likely for them to eke out either this year or next year is what she called like piecemeal legislation. So maybe the DREAM Act will pass. Maybe we'll get reform on these skilled visas.
Or ag jobs.
So we're probably more likely to see, before we see immigration reform on the systemic level, pieces of reform.
And that's an interesting thing to sort of keep in mind, is because there are some people in the advocacy circles who don't even want to entertain the thought of piecemeal legislation. And I think it comes down to their strategy, in the sense that you want to ask for as much as you can up front.
Yeah.
So hence comprehensive immigration reform.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and we'll definitely keep you in the loop. So thanks so much for watching. Again, follow us on Twitter. I'm Sada Chica D.
I'm Latino Politics.
And we're going to put all this information in the description box. Subscribe, like, share, comment, and we'll see you here next week.
Bye.
Bye.